Hi, welcome to the 11th part of the End of Capitalism and Its Alternatives lecture of the Marxist Economics course. This lecture series is prepared for the Minas University Northern Cyprus campus. And last time we were talking about the reasons of the collapse of the Soviet Union. And certainly there was some group of people, skilled workers mostly, who actually demanded maybe better quality consumer products, some additional options like jeans, for example, McDonald's, things like that, which were more shaped to maybe get attention of the people. Well, we could say that Soviet Union experiments of socialism could bring them more than the typical consumption goods, mainly, basically, create some type of life where consumption can be done more collectively, or collective options like parks, for example, or are more encouraged, or creativity of the people are more encouraged. I mean, the people might have more opportunities to do what they want. The system might allow them to do that. But unfortunately, Soviet Union was mostly mimicking the Western, capitalist economic systems. You still work for the state, you go and buy, maybe you have some support to the arts, but basically not an ordinary Soviet citizen mostly don't have other creative activities than his or her work, as far as the resources I have told me, basically. The children might have some additional options maybe, but not the workers in general. So middle class, especially the skilled workers, might be discontent with this to some extent. But the worst thing they were complaining probably was they feel they had less control over their lives than the system in general, because the democratic institutions were not there. They were not able to set the rules. And to some extent, where they work, what they do is also determined by they had less control on that. The party and the state had more say on that. And since everything is owned by the party could decide also where to employ the person. You have nowhere else to get employed. So this lack of control was a problem. But in the end, as I said, the transformation happened at the top. At the top, basically, wanted to turn their political power. So basically, the Communist Party has turned into a political elite in Bolshevik Party. In other words, turned a political elite after Stalin. So, if you want to really be powerful, then it is a good strategy to become communist. Member of Communist Party. You don't become member of Communist Party. You are idealist. You are necessarily idealist as before. You are member of Communist Party because you want to be powerful. But members of that Communist Party also want to turn that power. Some members, we might say, might want to turn that power to economic power also. They had some additional economic power, but it was relatively more limited than the economic power that could be get in other that could be they could get if the country was, let's say, a capitalist country. So in the end, many members of the Communist Party also they become the top members. They also become the leading capitalists in the country later. So they turned their political power to the economic power. So the Vanguard Party, which was meant to lead the working class to establish and maintain the social system, in the end, kind of betrayed to the social system. So they were the leaders, which lead to exit from the social system also. So there was a significant political problem, certainly, and that was why, because in 1950s and 60s, US was not proud of capitalist system. US was proud of democracy. They didn't say communism versus capitalism. They said in 1950s and 60s especially, they said communism versus democracy. Even in 1980s, democracy and capitalism were meshed together. Capitalism by itself was not promoted separately from the democracy. And even today, I mean, the worst thing about communism is it leads to dictatorship. Political side of socialist system is usually more prone to say why socialist system is a bad system. But let's see how socialist system, since we are in economics class, can be criticized in economic way. And here we had Stiglitz, who had provided 3 different critiques. All of them have a point, but all of them can also be to some extent criticized. So let's see both sides for all 3 problems. One is the information problem. The idea is if you don't have price mechanism in the social system, you will not be able to get basically what is required more, demanded more by the people. As a result, supply cannot adjust itself according to the demand in a social system. That was the critique. Is it so? Well, price mechanism might have sent certain signals in capitalist system. And certainly, in social systems, there were sometimes the famous empty shelves. Certain goods are not produced enough. But this takes it to the other side. What happens if certain goods are not produced enough in a capitalist system? Well, their prices go up. And when their prices go up, of course, the shelves remains full, while people won't be able to buy them because their prices is high. So social system cannot do that. So partially, price mechanism cannot be used in its full course to prevent some people to buy their necessities in a social system. And that's one of the reasons why the shelves are empty. So if you want to just clear demand and supply, price mechanism is a good thing. But if you want to make sure people in your country meet their basic needs, in that case, well, sometimes you need to have empty shelves. Sometimes you need to do even rationing. So that's one thing. But still, whether there could be a better way to give signals from the consumers or the people who use those. You use the commodities or the goods and the producers or the organization of the production, the people who organize the production, is a question still. And, well, that's a question, but there's also a caution. Same thing for the innovation problem. Well, according to Stiglitz, in Soviet Union, since there was no competition, there was no motivation for innovation. Well, the companies won't innovate because they don't need to innovate to get let's say, ahead of the other companies. Well, did Soviet Union innovate? It did innovate. It was first country that get into space. It was powerful in many industries. And in many industries, it has innovated. It has made innovations in the, for example, energy production sectors. Well, so there was some innovation in Soviet Union. Well, basically, the innovation in a country like Soviet Union can very well directed according to the needs of the society. And basically, the way at the center, it is seen as what is required for the development. Of course, without the input of the population in general, that innovation can be misled. But certainly, innovations happened and in some ways they were developing the society in the Soviet Union. The main innovation type that was lacking was on the consumption products. So there were cars, Soviet-produced cars, Soviet-produced products, but usually they were accused of being low quality. But were they low quality? Well, here we should be cautious again. When US makes high-quality cars, it makes those cars for people who can afford to buy. When Soviet Union makes the cars, it tries to make those cars available to the most people in the population. Which means, in order that car should be produced more cheaply, and that might require it to be have less quality. So that might be one explanation of the low quality consumer products. But we should also keep in mind to develop the consumer products in more fine sense, you need inputs from society, and lack of democracy, this centralized party that is deciding everything, controlling everything in name of people, prevents that type of communication between the people in general and the decision makers, basically. So people are not actively taking in the decision-making process that prevents maybe this type of innovations, these fine innovations. But party can very well decide on the broad needs of the society and make innovations accordingly. While in a country like, for example, United States, health costs are very high, but there are no innovations that are decreasing the health costs. Because as long as those high healthcare prices are met by desperate people, people go bankrupt. Some people cannot afford, but healthcare sector gets sufficient level of profits because there are sufficient number of desperate people from the upper class or lower middle class, upper middle class. So they are good with it. They are okay with it. So they don't make innovations to decrease the costs. Then you have motivation problem, and this is interesting. Well, if you don't have a wage mechanism working, you cannot motivate people. This is the idea. Well, you can motivate people, and you can see it in current business classes if you take some. For example, you motivate people to make inputs for Google. You motivate people to make contributions on the internet without paying them, basically. So people are motivated by different things, like being independent, being master of certain things, being experts of certain things. For example, being a good guitar player. Just that motivates people. Having autonomy, being able to what they decide to do, certainly motivates people. So people can be motivated without using the wage mechanism. While socialism, as we have seen before, can also use the wage mechanism. So certainly wage mechanism is not a mechanism that should not be used in socialist system. Although the degrees can be set at different level, but it can be used in the socialist system. While we might say, actually, in the capitalist system, actually, many people, to what extent wages are motivating people is also a question. To what extent, basically, the wage mechanism makes people as productive as possible? Or to what extent people are more afraid of losing, they are afraid of not being able to survive, and that's why they are productive. This is also a question. And looking to the Soviet Union growth rates, actually, there was a high growth rate for much of the Soviet Union's history. There was a stagnation in the 1980s, but so was stagnation in the United States. So stagnation is not uncommon for the capitalist system. It's also common in the capitalist system. What Soviet Union lacked was internal political strength to survive that stagnation. So both United States and Soviet Union has experienced stagnation, but Soviet Union was not able to survive it. Why? Because people of Soviet Union, unfortunately, could not own the system, even at its bad times. While people in the United States, although there was a lot of tension between the members of different segments of the society, still owned the system in the crisis of 1970s. And here we should look to again, I believe, to the political sphere. So these are the problems mentioned by Stiglitz. And for innovation and information problem, especially innovation problem, the fine innovation, he might have a point. For motivation problem, I think that's the weakest problem. Information problem, he still has a point. But still read it. It's an important critique of the social system, one of the most important critiques of the social system, certainly. It's in your readings, let's say. Lastly, we will talk on after collapse of Soviet Union. Actually, these were brought two different alternatives of alternative social system, and I will talk on some maybe additional alternatives. And basically, we should not even be completely locked to one alternative, in my opinion. So in the last part, I will talk on these alternatives and discussion of this last week, and then finish the lecture. See you in the last part.